Today's story is actually a lucky moment for you folks because I'm actually going to take one of the bigger stories out of my book that's coming out in a few months so that we can see how this art of underreaction really plays out. Hey fam, welcome back to the channel. Excited to share today's story time story with you. Is that how you say it? Anywho, we're going to tell a story. I'm going to tell a story. Hopefully you're going to listen. And just so you don't ask in the comments, or maybe you do a comment on it, like I just noticed that my thing looks inside out. And I tried it on like 3 or 4 times only to find out that it's actually supposed to be inside out. So yeah, I'm aware of it. I'm very aware of it. It irritated me, but I was too lazy to change. So on we go with the story. So today's story, what we're going to be talking about is something that I mentioned in just the last video, the art of underreaction. The question that came in from the readers, how did I get my girls to be so independent from a young age? And one of the things that I talked about in there that I mentioned was something called the art of underreaction. So today's story is actually a lucky moment for you folks because I'm actually going to take one of the bigger stories out of my book that's coming out in a few months so that we can see how this art of underreaction really plays out. All right, so let's jump in. Now, what is the art of underreaction? Really, that's what it is. It is an art. You have to be mindful of it, right? But the idea is here as a parent that you're not overreacting to everything. Like we are very reactive, at least the house that I grew up in. And the parents that I see nowadays, they're just so reactive. And a lot of us can really stand to be a lot calmer, and we could probably have a lot more peace and calm in our life if we chose this act of underreacting, really hearing out what our kids are saying, taking a moment to observe and see what's really playing out and what's going on, and see how you can be the benefactor of a lesson as opposed to the dictator of this is how this needs to be done and you're the kid, I'm the parent, so you listen. It's a very different approach in that way. It usually engages when it's something that's normally quite uncomfortable for people. For me, it almost always came up in the form of talk about sex, right? With my girls, it was almost always, but there were other things too. But sex is the easiest one for people to relate to. And this is how I was able to land at my ability to just really keep it calm. As a preteen, my hormones were just on a rage. I'm sure yours were too, just as every preteen is, right? All these different things are happening in our body. So as well did happen the interest in, for me, the opposite sex, right? I was interested in boys. And so all these questions and how do you do things? You see boys and girls kissing and holding hands. It's just like you see all these things happening and you don't have any real bearing on how to do things and what it means and when I should be doing it. And it just leaves you just, okay, I'm just going to do it, and you're going to act it out as opposed to really know what you're doing. And so when these questions come up or when these subjects come up for most parents, it's just like you're too young to be talking about that. Just know, don't do it. Right? And like I talked about in my last video, like my approach with parenting was, I'm your guide. Let me help you through. Let me help you to understand this, because if you're going to get information, I want it to come from me. Not that I want to have control over everything, but I kind of do. I want to know. Not that I do, but I don't, right? But I do. What I mean is that if you're going to be getting information, especially sensitive information, such as subject matter of sex, I want to make sure that you're getting the right information, right? Because here's the thing, in the ending, all these prepubescent kids are going to grow up to be adults. They're going to grow up to be adults. So let's just tell them the truth right now. The truth will make us uncomfortable, but it'll give them the actual lay of the land, if you will. It'll give them the lay of the land so that they understand things. And a lot of times, I'll tell you what's great about it is they get very ill about it. Like they're like, ew, is that really what happens? Oh, I don't want to do that. Right? So when you tell them the reality of it, they don't want to do it. I mean, not all the time. Of course, they still want to do it. But, you know, the likelihood of them wanting to do it goes down. So let me tell you the story that happened with my daughters when they were 10. And this literally, all my girls are 5 years apart. I had them all within 5 years. But the same subject matter came up when each of them were 10. It's kind of crazy, and it's about masturbation. So let me tell you the first story that happened. So my girls are 10, and we are living in Section 8 housing. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm folding clothes. I'm folding the laundry that I had washed and dried earlier. And I know it's 4 o'clock because I was watching Oprah, right? That's just the moment when everyone, you go do your homework, keep yourself quiet, do whatever you want. Mommy wants to watch Oprah, because I didn't have a VCR to record it. There was no DVR back then. It's so crazy how a little while ago it was, but also how far away it seems to be with technology. But anyways, I was watching Oprah. And so all I heard was my girls in their room cracking up laughing, just like rolling over laughing. It's so funny. And I was like, girls, be quiet, I'm watching Oprah. And then they kept on doing it. Girls, be quiet, I'm watching Oprah. And then I'm turning up the volume and I'm still hearing them. I'm like, girls, be quiet. Finally, when it got to commercial, I put it on mute and I called them out to the living room. I said, what is going on, girls? And they're like, oh, nothing. I said, well, I'm trying to watch Oprah and you guys keep on being so loud I can't even hear the TV. And so they're like, oh my God, it's just this funny joke that we heard in school today. Mommy, you want to hear it? I'm like, not really, because Oprah's about to come on. They're like, come on, let me tell you. So they start to say this joke, which goes along the lines of, what do you catch a fish with? And I said, I don't know, a net, a hook? And they were like, no, like fish bait. I was like, okay. They're like, well, what do you catch a cat with? I said, a box, a trap. And they're like, no, mommy, cat bait. I was like, okay, so I was starting to get it right. And so then, of course, the punchline was, well, what do you catch a master with? And I say, masturbate? And they're like, ah! They're like laughing, rolling, hitting each other on the back, just like laughing. And I'm just there straight-faced. I'm like, masturbate, that's the punchline. And they're like, yeah, isn't it so funny, mommy? I'm like, no, yeah, that ain't funny to me. And they're like, well, it's pretty funny. I said, well, you know what's funny to me is I know what masturbate is. Do you know what masturbate is? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, tell me what it is. And they didn't know what it was. They really didn't know what it was. And in that moment, I was just like, I didn't get mad. I wasn't yelling. I was just mostly pissed because, fuck, I had to turn off Oprah. It was a good episode. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be the responsible parent and I'm going to turn off the TV. So I turn off the TV and I say, girls, do you know what masturbate is? And they're like, no. I said, okay, well, we're going to have a lesson right now. And now that I'm not watching Oprah, I'm giving you guys some attention. I'm going to share with you what it is, how a girl does it, how a boy does it, why they do it, when when it's good to do. And they're like, okay, because my girls they're kind of like me. They just like to learn, right? Well, as I start getting into the lesson about like how girls do it and how boys do it, they're just kind of sitting there. I get to see their eyes like glazing over, like, oh my God, that's my mom. And I'm telling them the textbook version of what they would read. And that was my way of saying it, right? It was my way of answering the question that needed to be answered, that they were asking, kind of indirectly asking by saying that they didn't, that they knew what masturbate was, even if they didn't. Because I wanted the information that I gave to them to be able to be verified if they weren't and looked it up themselves on the internet or an encyclopedia or dictionary. I wanted them to see that their mother, their mommy, was telling them the truth about what it is. So I told them a very textbook example, but then I also just gave kind of casual ways on how it gets done. So I tell them again how a girl does it, how a boy does it. And at the ending, they're looking at me. I'm like, any questions? And you could just tell it was heavy for them. You have to think they're 10 years old, right? And they're like, so what does the boy do with the stuff that comes out? Is it just like in his hand? And I'm like, exactly. It's all in his hand or wherever he shoots it into. And they're like, ew, they're just like, they're so grossed out. I was like, see, this is not something you need to be doing now. And they're like, oh my God, mommy, like we didn't know that's what it was. And I said, you know what, you go back to school tomorrow and you tell your friends what it is, right? You tell them what I told you, and maybe you're not even comfortable telling them, but you tell them, right? And if they go home and they tell their parents and their parents get mad that now they know this information, my phone number, pass it to that parent, let me talk to them. I will talk to them about adult things so that they know how to, help their child along. And they're like, okay, because really the lesson I was trying to tell them was like, okay, jokes are funny. Are you just laughing because the crowd says, was laughing and they say that it's funny? Or do they really understand what they're talking about? That was the lesson. Masturbation just happened to be the subject matter, right? And so I was able to teach that lesson of like not just following the crowd and really questioning things and getting like truthful answers about them and truly understanding what things are before just laughing them off. And that's kind of a basis for a lot of understanding as you grow up as an adult. I know for me, when I grew up, jokes that were sexually or gender-wise charged were just kind of laughed off. And I just kind of laughed off because on the surface, it's kind of funny. But on some level, you're talking about someone's truth, right? Whether it's about their race, whether it's about their gender, or whether it's about the change of their gender, all these different things affect somebody, a human being, a living human being. And when I became a parent, I realized quickly that, yeah, no, that's not always okay. And so I wanted my girls to understand that the things that you spread, even if it's just as simple as a joke, you need to know what you're talking about, right? And the way I was able to get through to them was by not overreacting and being like, what the fuck are you guys talking about masturbation for? You're only 10 years old. You need to get into your room. You guys are grounded. I mean, like, that's the response I would have got to when I was growing up, right? And, you know, I didn't feel like that was going to be helpful to them in their pathway to growing up and you know, getting older and understanding these things about sex, even if it's just pertaining to masturbation. So that is one of the things I do when it comes to the art of underreaction. The art is really keeping yourself calm in the midst of the storm, right? The storm of what your kid might be saying to you that you're like, oh shit, I do not want to talk about this now. I really don't want to talk about this right now. You know, I didn't want to talk about masturbation that day. I wanted to watch Oprah, but here I was turning it off because this was of higher importance. And that's what I want you folks to understand, parents. I want you to really understand that we have to be more present, and it's really hard with this bullshit. Okay, like, as much as I know I need this phone, right, and all that it gives me access to, it's such a distraction from our families, right? Particularly our kids who need us, right? And their faces are in it too. So they're, you know, it's hard because they're in it too. Like, we're all in it. It really has to be a conscious effort in order for us to give presence to our children, and that's presence, S-E-N-C-E, not presents as in gifts. All right, we need to give presence to our children. That's the best gift that we can give them. I can tell you right now, my kids are not young, but they're also they're old enough to be out of the house. I did something enough to get them out of the house and not have them come back, right? And if they come back, like, something really bad happened, and we'll help them along. But my whole goal as I was raising them was, get out, you go figure it out, and you go through your struggles. I'll help you along with some things, but for the most part, if I can see that you are doing well, when it comes my time to pass away, whenever that day is, hopefully it's many, many decades from now, I will die in peace, because not only will I have watched you from afar grow into this beautiful woman and have your own families or whatever they have, but also I played a role, but I didn't do it for you. My job, again, is just guide. It is up to you to become who you are. It's up to you to discover things, up to you to have your successes and your failures and all the experiences that makes a beautiful life. My job is now to basically be the observer of all the work that I've put in as I was watching this seed grow. And that's how I want you folks to look at parenting. It can be a beautiful thing. It's a stressful thing. Don't get me wrong. I fucking sucked at it in the beginning, especially when my kids are small. But now, being on the other end of it, that's why I love to help moms, because they're still so stuck in the busyness and the stress of it that they can't see the opportunity for beauty and the opportunity for teaching. And that's why I want to help you folks. So thank you so much for listening into the story time today. Hope you enjoyed that. And if you enjoyed that story, oh my God, there's many more like that in Evicted at 8 when it comes in. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and you hear when it comes out, or follow me on my Instagram, and I'll definitely be announcing the actual release date there. Just remember that I will see you on the other side, and until I see you then, keep evolving. Bye.